and Kevin Hillier was living in a bus with his wife and 4 children at a caravan park in Victoria, Australia. The family struggled financially, and their situation was made even worse when Kevin was injured at work, forcing him to have surgery on his back. Luckily, the operation was a success, and his doctor recommended he go for walks to help his back heal and to regain his strength. Thinking he could make these walks a little more enjoyable, he used one of his workers' compensation checks to buy a metal detector. Now, Victoria was an area of Australia that actually experienced a gold rush in the 1850s, so who knows, maybe there was some gold still left underground in the area. But nobody could have predicted what Kevin was going to find, except maybe Kevin himself. See, one night, Kevin had a dream of finding a huge gold nugget. The dream was so vivid that when he awoke, he immediately drew it on a piece of paper and asked his neighbor to sign the drawing as a witness. 12 days later, Kevin and his wife Bep were walking around King Owner State Park, and of course they brought their metal detectors with them. They quickly went their separate ways, searching in different areas of the park. Suddenly, Bep hears Kevin screaming in the distance. Her immediate thought was that Kevin had hurt himself again, and she rushed through the woods to find him. She soon found Kevin on his knees in the bush, crying. He was praying and looked like he'd seen a ghost. In front of him was a hole he had dug, and at the bottom of the hole was a shiny gold nugget. Bep joined her husband on the ground, and they began digging around the nugget, which just kept getting bigger and bigger. When they finally found the bottom of the nugget and lifted it out of the ground, it was nearly 2 feet long and weighed 60 pounds. They loaded it into their car and drove back to the caravan park, where they waited until the coast was clear before carrying it into their bus. They told no one about their discovery, aside from their kids and a close friend who knew a gem dealer who could help them find a seller. While waiting for the sale, Kevin and Bep slept with their enormous gold nugget hidden under their bed. Eventually, the nugget was sold to the Golden Nugget Casino chain for $1 million. Needless to say, Kevin and his family don't live in a bus anymore, though they still do go walking with metal detectors. Hold on, I think I found something. A man shopping at a local flea market in Pennsylvania purchased a $4 painting. He actually didn't really care for the art, but it was cheap, and he loved the old-looking frame it was in. So when he got home, he decided to tear out the existing painting, and behind it, he found an old folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and found himself staring at what appeared to be a very old copy of the Declaration of Independence. In case you need a history lesson, the Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson in 1776 and was the founding document of the United States of America. The man with the frame assumed it was old but didn't think much of it and set it off to the side for a few years until one day he showed it to a friend who encouraged him to have an expert take a look at it. The man contacted Sotheby's, a renowned auction house, and when an expert came to look at the man's document, he was shook. See, way back on the night of July 4th, 1776, immediately after the Declaration of Independence was confirmed, a man named John Dunlap rushed to print 200 copies at his printing press, which are now known as the Dunlap broadsides. These are now recognized as the first ever printed copies of the Declaration of Independence. The copy that was hidden behind this $4 picture was in fact one of the Dunlap broadsides, which at the time only 24 were known to have survived. Not only did it survive, it was in pristine condition. The document appeared to have been folded when the ink was still wet, meaning it was possible the copy was hidden in that painting for 2 centuries. This copy was auctioned off in 1991, and the man walked away with $2.4 million. This same copy was then sold again in the year 2000 for $8.14 million. But honestly, I don't think the first guy who turned $4 into $2 million was all that upset. Number 4, the Hoxton Hoard. On November 16, 1992, a farmer named Peter Watling lost a hammer in one of his fields in eastern England. After searching for a while with no luck, he called his friend Eric Laws, who was an amateur metal detectorist, to help him find it. Eric came over with his metal detector and began searching. Eric's detector began beeping, so he bent over to see if he'd found the hammer. No luck on that, because instead he found a scattering of jewelry and gold and silver coins. The two, not knowing what was going on, contacted the local government and reported what they had found. The next day, a team of archaeologists arrived on the farm and began an extensive excavation in the field. Nobody expected what they were about to dig up. A massive pile of treasure from the late Roman Empire was found in the field in what appeared to be the remains of a wooden chest. The team discovered 569 gold coins, over 14,000 silver coins, 24 bronze coins, gold jewelry, silver spoons and ladles, and various other fine silver antiques, all which had appeared to be undisturbed for over a millennia. The estimated worth of the treasure was 1.75 million British pounds, or around $3 million at the time. The findings were declared a treasure trove by the government, meaning it was hidden with the intention of being dug up later by its owner. Under English common law, all such treasure belongs to the crown if no one claims ownership. But before they could rage against the machine, the men were told that it was customary for the person who discovered a treasure trove to be paid a finder's fee, and Eric was given the full 1.75 million pounds, which he shared with his farmer friend Peter. The treasure, now known as the Hoxton Hoard, is on display at the British Museum. Peter's hammer was also found during the excavation, by the way, and is also there as well. Number 3, the Crosby Garrett Roman helmet. In May of 2010, a man in his 20s with a, stop me if you've heard this before, metal detector in northwest England was searching for treasure near an ancient Roman road. He had found a few coins in the area in the past, but he'd never seen anything like he was going to find on this day. When his metal detector went off, he dug down 10 inches and discovered 67 pieces of metal that appeared to be folded and placed neatly on a stone slab. He assumed it was an artifact from the Victorian era, but upon taking it home and searching the internet, he discovered that it was actually an ancient Roman artifact. The helmet was restored and revealed it was a ceremonial cavalry helmet from the 2nd or 3rd century, most likely used in competitions performed in front of emperors or army commanders. There had been a couple of similar helmets discovered earlier in history, but none were this complete and in this condition. Now, the interesting thing about this helmet was, unlike the Hoxton hoard from earlier, because this was a single piece, it did not meet the criteria to be considered treasure, so the man who found it was free to do whatever he wanted with it. So, of course, instead of donating it to a museum, he brought it to Christie's to auction off as soon as he could. A museum did attempt to win the helmet at auction, but was outbid by a private collector for the sum of 2.3 million British pounds, or roughly $3.6 million at the time. Number 2. The Mocking of Christ. Okay, this one is crazy. Imagine having millions of dollars in your home for decades, but never even knowing it. In 2019, a 90-year-old woman living in northern France decided to put her house up for sale and move to another area. She'd lived in that house for decades and had accumulated a lot of stuff throughout the years, so she called a local auctioneer to come over to her home to determine if anything she had was worth selling. The auctioneer, when entering the woman's home, immediately noticed an old painting hanging above a hot plate stove in her kitchen. The auctioneer asked the woman where she got the painting, as it looked very old, and she replied that she had it so long that she didn't remember how she ended up with it. The woman said she thought it was some old Russian religious thing, but the auctioneer disagreed and sent the painting to an art historian in Paris for further inspection. Almost everything else the woman owned was sent to a landfill. When the woman's painting reached Paris, the art historian could not believe what he was holding. This was not a Russian religious artifact, but was actually an extremely rare painting done by the Italian artist Cimabue. The painting, now called The Mocking of Christ, was part of a 4-part series that Cimabue painted depicting the moments leading up to the crucifixion. Cimabue was a revolutionary painter from the 13th century who had only done a dozen or so works at this size. The woman's painting was put to auction and the bidding rocketed up to 19.5 million euros and finally sold to 2 anonymous art collectors for 24 million euros with fees included, or around $26 million. Imagine having $26 million just hanging in your kitchen and then only discovering it in your 90s. Sheesh. Number 1. The Third Imperial Egg. This last one is the biggest payday on the list and probably the most mysterious. In 2011, a scrap metal dealer in the American Midwest was browsing around a local flea market and stumbled across a strange metal egg at one of the booths. It was weird looking. It had 3 legs that ended in lion's paws, but it looked to be made of gold, so he thought he could melt it down and sell it for the value of its metal. He purchased the egg for a little over $13,000 and headed to his scrap metal buyer. I'm sure the flea market vendor probably felt he had just made a hell of a deal. $13K is a huge sale at a flea market, but selling that egg might have been the worst decision of his life. The metal dealer showed the egg to his scrap metal buyer, who said that the price he was asking was way too high. Disappointed and not wanting to take a loss, the dealer brought the egg home, and it sat around his house for years. One day, upon seeing his waste of $13,000 sitting around on his kitchen counter, the man decided to Google the name that was engraved on the egg. After clicking around a bit, he was shocked to find an article with a picture of the same egg sitting on his counter. He took some pictures of his egg and flew to London to meet the man from the article, who is actually an esteemed antiques dealer that specializes in Russian jewelry. Upon his first look at the photos, the dealer knew exactly what this man had in his possession. The dealer describes the moment of seeing the photos as if he was Indiana Jones finding the lost ark. He couldn't sleep for days. What this unassuming man from the Midwest had purchased at a flea market was one of the lost Russian Imperial Fabergé eggs. Way back in 1887, Tsar Alexander III commissioned Peter Carl Fabergé to create an Easter present for his wife Maria Fyodorovna. It was one of 50 eggs made by Fabergé for the Russian imperial family. Following the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks acquired much of the treasure from the royal family and sold off much of it to fund their new government. Somehow, through multiple transactions, this incredible artifact found itself on a table at a Midwest flea market. The egg was purchased by the antiques dealer on behalf of a private collector for an undisclosed price, but experts valued the egg at the time of its sale at around $33 million. Hope the flea market guy never sees